Mia Turner had always loved machines more than people. Ever since she was a child, she found peace in the sound of turning wrenches and the hum of engines. Her father had owned a small boat repair shop near Clearwater, Florida, and she grew up helping him every weekend. While other kids played on the beach, she would be the one covered in grease trying to fix old motors that everyone else had given up on. Her father used to laugh and say, "Mia, one day you'll bring something back to life that no one believes can be saved." Those words stayed with her long after he was gone. At 27, Mia worked full-time as a marine mechanic. She was known in the area for her skill, especially when it came to large engines that others refused to touch. But even though she loved her work, she often felt stuck. Her shop paid just enough to cover rent, food, and bills. She wanted something more, something that felt like her own. Her co-workers often joked that she dreamed too big. "You can't rebuild the ocean, Mia," one of them said once, laughing. She only smiled and replied, "Maybe not, but I can rebuild anything that floats." One Friday night, after another long day of fixing broken propellers, she sat in her small apartment with her laptop open. She was scrolling through online listings for scrap parts when she saw something strange. The title read, "Abandoned cruise ship for sale and as is must move by buyer." She blinked and read it again. The price was shockingly low, almost unbelievable. It cost less than a new fishing boat. Curiosity got the better of her and she clicked on the ad. The listing showed a series of blurry photos. A massive ship docked in a lonely port covered in rust and dirt. The windows were shattered and the decks looked like they hadn't seen a broom in years. The description said it was a mid-sized cruise ship that had been left at a Louisiana shipyard after its owning company went bankrupt during a financial collapse. It had been sitting there untouched for nearly a decade. Most people would have scrolled past such a mess, but Mia couldn't stop staring at it. She leaned closer to the screen. "It's dead," she whispered to herself, but maybe not too dead. The next day, she couldn't focus at work. The thought of that forgotten ship haunted her. During lunch, she told her friend Eric, a marine engineer who often helped her with large projects, about the listing. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "You're kidding, right? That thing's probably full of rats and ghosts. You can't buy a whole cruise ship, Mia." But she didn't laugh with him. She looked serious. "I can fix it," she said quietly. "I know it sounds crazy, but what if I just look at it?" 2 weeks later, she was standing on the dock in Louisiana, staring up at the giant metal beast that towered above her. It was worse than she expected. The once white hull was now a deep orange of rust, streaked with green moss. Broken ropes dangled into the water. The air smelled like salt, oil, and years of neglect. But to Mia, it wasn't a dead ship. It was a sleeping giant. A gruff old caretaker met her near the gangway. "You the girl who bought this thing?" he asked, squinting in disbelief. She nodded. "Well, sweetheart, I hope you brought an army. Nobody's been inside that tub since before the last hurricane." He handed her a flashlight and shook his head. "Good luck. You'll need it." The first time she stepped aboard, the deck groaned under her boots. Everything was coated in dust and grime. The lobby area looked like a ghost town. Faded carpets, cracked glass chandeliers, and furniture tossed around from old storms. She walked slowly through the silent hallways, brushing away cobwebs, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Each door she opened revealed a new story. Empty cabins, broken televisions, torn curtains, and forgotten luggage. It was eerie, but strangely peaceful. She could almost imagine the laughter of passengers from long ago. By the end of the day, she was exhausted, but something inside her was alive with excitement. The ship might have been in terrible shape, but she could see potential. The engines were huge, old diesel turbines that hadn't been touched in years, but she recognized the design. With enough work, she could bring them back. She called Eric from her small rented room that night. "You're not serious about fixing it, are you?" he asked through the phone. "I'm serious about saving it," she replied. "Even if it takes years." The next few weeks became a blur of hard work. She returned with tools, fuel, and cleaning supplies. She spent her days clearing debris, checking wires, and cataloging the remaining parts. She slept on a mattress she brought aboard, using a small generator to power a single light bulb and a fan. She worked alone most nights, listening to the sound of the waves hitting the hull. The loneliness didn't bother her. She liked the quiet. It gave her time to think about her father, about how proud he would have been. One night, while exploring the lower decks, she noticed something odd. A narrow corridor led to a welded metal door that didn't match the rest of the ship. It looked newer, as if it had been sealed deliberately. She shone her light on it and saw faded markings in white paint. It read, Maintenance Section 9B Restricted. Her curiosity kicked in immediately. She tried pulling the handle, but it didn't budge. Someone had sealed it shut with thick steel welding. The next morning, she borrowed a cutting torch from a nearby shipyard worker. It took her nearly 2 hours to cut through the welds carefully. When the metal door finally creaked open, a wave of cool, stale air hit her face. Inside was a long, narrow room lined with old safes and metal crates stacked neatly against the walls. Everything was covered in dust, but it was clear the place hadn't been looted or disturbed. She stepped inside slowly, shining her light around. "Now what is all this?" she murmured. She brushed off one of the crates. It had markings from a company she didn't recognize, Aquadyne Industries. There were faded warning labels about experimental energy devices and proprietary materials. She frowned. That name sounded familiar. She had read about Aquadyne years ago, a private engineering company that had worked on advanced turbine systems before it mysteriously disappeared after a corporate bankruptcy. Most of its assets were reportedly lost or seized. Her heart began to race. Could these be prototypes? Why were they stored here in a forgotten cruise ship? She opened one of the safes using a crowbar. Inside were sealed envelopes, blueprints, and technical drawings. Many of them had confidential stamps. She pulled out one document and saw what looked like a design for a compact underwater turbine that could generate massive amounts of clean energy. If the drawings were real, this technology would be worth millions. But she didn't tell anyone, not yet. She wanted to be sure that night she couldn't sleep. She kept staring at the blueprints spread across the table in her small cabin. The ship creaked around her, the metal expanding and contracting with the temperature. She thought about what this could mean. If she was right, she hadn't just bought a rusting ship. She had bought something that once carried secrets worth a fortune. The next day, she called Eric and asked him to fly out. "I found something," she said simply. When he arrived and she led him into the sealed section, his jaw dropped. "Where did all this come from?" he asked, running his hand over the crates. Together, they spent hours cataloging everything they could. Eric confirmed that the materials and patents listed in the documents were real. "If this stuff is legitimate," he whispered, "you might have just bought more than a ship. You might have bought a lost company." But there were problems ahead. Some of the documents mentioned government contracts and classified projects. Mia knew she had to be careful. She decided to contact a maritime lawyer to verify what legally belonged to her. The lawyer was shocked when he saw the papers. "This is serious," he told her. "You need to handle this quietly until ownership is confirmed." Days turned into weeks as investigations began. She had to submit ownership documents, purchase receipts, and proof that the ship's assets transferred to her during the sale. It was a long process filled with delays and inspections. During that time, Mia kept working, cleaning, restoring, and protecting the sections she had opened. She didn't care about fame or money. For her, it was about proving everyone wrong. The ship wasn't junk. It was a story waiting to be told. One afternoon, as she sat on the deck watching the sunset, a few of the shipyard workers walked by and waved. "You still think it's worth saving, Turner?" One called out jokingly. She smiled. "Every single bolt," she replied. She didn't tell them what she had found. Not yet, it wasn't time. But deep down she knew that her father's words had come true. She had brought something back to life that everyone else had given up on. What she didn't yet realize was just how much that decision would change her life. Inside the ship she had bought for scrap, hidden beneath dust and rust, was a discovery that the world had forgotten. One that would soon make headlines everywhere. Mia woke up to the sound of seagulls tapping on the ship's railing. The morning sun broke through the cracked windows, lighting the dust floating in the air. For the first time since she bought the ship, she felt a sense of peace. The investigation had finally started moving forward, and her lawyer said the court might soon confirm that everything found on board legally belonged to her. Still, she tried not to get her hopes up. Life had taught her that nothing was certain until it was in writing. She brewed coffee on her small portable stove, sitting cross-legged on the deck. Around her, the harbor workers shouted and laughed as they repaired smaller boats nearby. They always looked at her with curiosity. Some admired her determination. Others thought she was wasting time. But she didn't care anymore. She knew what she was doing. Every screw she tightened, every metal sheet she replaced, it all brought the old ship closer to life again. Eric stayed with her for another week, helping test the electrical systems. The main generators coughed and sputtered but slowly began to respond. The first time one of them hummed back to life, Mia jumped in excitement. "Listen to that," she shouted. The vibration shook the floor lightly, like the ship's old heart starting to beat again. Eric smiled at her enthusiasm. "You really did it, Mia, she's breathing again." But soon after, reality hit. A few government officials showed up unannounced one morning. They asked about the crates and the blueprints. Mia stayed calm and answered every question honestly. She showed them the purchase documents and her lawyer's contact. The men took photographs and sealed off part of the lower deck for inspection. She wasn't sure whether to feel nervous or hopeful. The officials were polite, but their presence reminded her that she was now involved in something much larger than a ship repair project. Over the next month, she divided her time between cleaning and paperwork. Every night she would sit on the deck staring at the stars reflected in the dark water, wondering how strange life had become. A year ago, she was just fixing fishing boats for local sailors. Now reporters were starting to call her phone asking for interviews, and she hadn't even said anything publicly yet. Someone must have leaked the story of what she found. When the first news article appeared online, the headline read, "Mechanic girl may have found lost energy technology on abandoned cruise ship." Her phone didn't stop ringing for days. Some calls came from journalists, others from investors or collectors offering to buy the crates immediately. Mia refused to sell anything until she knew the truth. "I won't trade mystery for money," she told Eric. "I need to understand what I actually found." Eric helped her go through the documents more carefully. Together, they discovered that the prototypes belonged to a renewable energy experiment that had been shelved during the company's bankruptcy years ago. If fully developed, the design could generate clean electricity from slow ocean currents, far more efficiently than any known system. "This is big," Eric said one night, staring at the blueprints spread across a table in the ship's cafeteria. "This could change the future of marine power." Mia felt overwhelmed. She had always been a mechanic, not a scientist. She could fix machines but didn't know much about patents or technology rights. Her lawyer explained that as the new legal owner of the vessel, she might also own any abandoned property inside it. But the process to confirm that could take months or even years. Still, there was one thing in her favor. No one had claimed the ship in almost a decade. That gave her a strong legal position. Weeks passed and the ship slowly started to look alive again. Mia hired a few local workers to help with cleaning and painting. She paid them out of her savings, promising she'd make it right once everything was settled. They nicknamed the ship the Phoenix, saying it was rising from the ashes. Every day the decks grew cleaner, the hallways brighter, and the smell of decay faded. Mia smiled whenever someone complimented the progress. "It's not just a ship anymore," she said softly. "It's a dream." One evening, while checking the old navigation bridge, she found a sealed drawer hidden beneath the control panels. Inside were handwritten journals from the ship's last captain. The entries described how the company had been forced to hide valuable research equipment on board after an internal dispute. "We were ordered to store the prototypes here until legal matters are resolved," one entry read. "They told us to keep quiet, but I don't think anyone will ever come back for them." Reading that gave Mia chills. It confirmed that the equipment had truly been abandoned, not stolen or misplaced. That discovery strengthened her legal case even more. When her lawyer presented the journals as evidence in court, it changed everything. The ruling finally came after weeks of silence. The judge declared that all assets found on board the purchased ship were legally Mia Turner's property. The moment she heard the news, she sat in silence for several minutes, unable to speak. Eric was the first to congratulate her. "You did it," he said with a grin. "You really did it, Mia." The value of the discovery shocked everyone. Energy experts estimated the designs and prototype turbines could be worth up to $75 million if licensed or sold. Reporters flooded the dock the next day, eager for a photo or a quote. Cameras flashed as Mia walked down the ramp wearing her oil-stained overalls, still looking like the same simple mechanic who had first arrived months ago. A journalist shouted, "What will you do with all that money?" Mia paused, looked up at the massive ship behind her, and smiled. "I'm going to make her sail again," and she meant it. Instead of selling everything to the highest bidder, Mia chose to keep a portion of the profits to restore the cruise ship fully. She partnered with a group of engineers and investors who shared her vision to turn the old vessel into a floating innovation lab. They planned to test renewable energy systems right on board, making the ship a symbol of sustainable marine engineering. Within months, crews filled the port, welding, painting, and wiring new systems. The once silent shipyard buzzed with life. For Mia, the project became more than business. It became a tribute to her father. She often stood at the edge of the deck, whispering to herself, "We did it, Dad." She decided to name one of the ship's decks after him, the Turner Workshop. She also created a small scholarship fund using part of her earnings, dedicated to helping young women who wanted to study mechanical engineering. "I want them to have chances I didn't," she explained during an interview. Her story inspired thousands across the country, especially girls who dreamed of working in fields where they were often told they didn't belong. Months later, when the ship's engines roared back to life for the first time in over 10 years, people from the nearby town gathered to watch. The moment the smokestacks released their first clean puff of air, the crowd cheered. Mia wiped a tear from her cheek. The ship she had bought for scrap was now reborn. Newspapers around the world covered the story. Mechanic girl turns rust into gold. It became a symbol of perseverance, intelligence, and courage. But behind all the success, Mia remained humble. She still lived simply, still fixed engines herself, and still preferred the smell of oil to perfume. When reporters asked how she stayed grounded after earning millions, she laughed softly. "I just fix things. That's all I know how to do." She refused to move away from the ship, choosing instead to live in one of its restored cabins. Every morning, she'd make her coffee on the same small stove she used before, watching the sunrise from the deck. Eric continued working beside her, managing the new lab projects. One afternoon, he handed her a framed newspaper article showing her standing proudly beside the ship. "You know," he said, "not many people would have taken a chance on something so broken." Mia smiled. "Everything that's broken can be fixed if you care enough." Over the next few years, the Phoenix became famous in the marine world. Research teams visited from universities to test new green energy devices. The ship that once stood forgotten in a rusty port was now a hub of innovation and education. The scholarship she funded helped dozens of young mechanics, especially those from small towns like hers, attend engineering schools. Each of them looked up to her as a symbol of what determination could achieve. One day, a young reporter asked her during a documentary interview, "What was the moment you realized you had found something worth $75 million?" Mia chuckled and replied, "It wasn't when I saw the blueprints or the money. It was the day I turned the generator back on and heard her heartbeat again. That's when I knew she was worth everything." She often visited the lower decks where she had first discovered the sealed room. The crates were now carefully stored in a secure research section, labeled and cataloged. Every time she walked past them, she remembered that moment of discovery. The dim flashlight beam, the smell of rust, and the sense that she was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. She kept one of the old blueprints framed in her cabin as a reminder of where it all began. Years later, when she was invited to speak at an international marine engineering conference, she stood on stage nervously, looking at hundreds of faces staring back. "I'm not a scientist," she began, "and I'm not a genius. I'm just a mechanic who refused to listen when people said something was impossible. This ship taught me that sometimes the things people throw away still have a heartbeat."